York's classic rock, Q1043.
Ken Dashow, Q104.3, with somebody who's a legend I've always wanted to talk to. This is a thrill for me. Herb Alpert, welcome. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, heard a lot about your show. You're popular, man.
You hang
Even on
around long enough, but like you, I mean, the hardest part about this interview is not going to be spending the entire time telling you how awesome you are and you saying thanks a lot, but but there's a lot to be thankful for. You're one of those people. The only other person I know sort of in that world is Peter Asher, somebody who is a performer, somebody who is a producer, manager, and then launched this little record company called A&M Records. And I mean, I don't even know how to begin, but how do I say, hey, thank you for the Police, the Carpenters, the Go-Go's, Joe Cocker, Supertramp, Rick Wakeman, Squeeze, Iggy Pop, Procol Harum, Suzanne Vega. I mean, where do I even begin? So much of our music is thanks to A&M Records.
don't forget Quincy Jones, the great Q.
You are absolutely correct. I mean, the list would be the entire alphabet of what you're doing. But
Yeah.
it's interesting when a performer starts in and you see the music business as a whole. And the interesting thing about A&M Records to me is Sony, well, Columbia back then, CBS, was kind of like the singer-songwriter label to me. It was Dylan, it was singers. Atlantic was blues and R&B. And A&M to me was everything. A&M, it was quality, but it wasn't this music or that music. You had the Carpenters, you have Styx. It was whatever it was.
Well, we were about music. I recorded for a major company prior to A&M, and I didn't like the way I was treated. They treated me like a number, 38652, take one. I didn't get it. And then I was listening to a playback of one of the songs that I did, and I wanted to have a little bit more bass. So I went over to the console and I lifted the bass track up, and the engineer actually he slapped my hand. He said, "Man, don't ever do that again. This is a union board, and we can all get in trouble." I said, "Oh my, this is not the way it's supposed to be." I thought if I ever had my own record company, it would be artists first. It'd be revolving around the artists and not the beat of the week. I wanted to, explore artists that have something magical to say, a different way of saying it. And, that's what A&M was all about.
And look at the thing is you can't do that, you can't do that. Well, look at the results. That all that matters is the results, and look at the great music and the great bands that you nurtured and cultivated. Speaking of great bands and great albums, so here we are. Before we get too much for one of the concerts, this has been a great year for music. Seeing the Rolling Stones in MetLife Stadium, seeing Madness, and Herb Alpert coming to New York City, March 31st, Jazz at Lincoln Center, Rose Theater, your 90th birthday celebration. Congratulations. But again, I just saw Willie Nelson. He killed it. The Stones, Paul McCartney's touring. Who's stopping? It's music. Who's stopping? Why stop doing something you love?
I think when you do it in an authentic way, and I think the artists you just mentioned, they're into it because they're into it. It's not like they're trying to, be more popular. And they've had their moments in the sun, but they love it. They do it because it's a need for them.
I,
And so,
I,
like,
got-
I'm absolutely mind boggled by the response to me getting together with the new version of the Tijuana Brass, because like you said, on March 31st, on my birthday at Lincoln Center, I'm gonna play this concert, and it's sold out. So we had to add a second night. So
Herb,
through the years I've been playing little bits of the Tijuana Brass pieces in concert with my wife. But people wanted to hear the whole thing, so I'm going to give them the whole thing, and it's going to be fun. I'm adding musicians to the group, and I can't wait.
listen, what do I know? I'm not Ron Delser. He's just a longtime friend. You could have played the Beacon Theater 2, 3 nights. I'm telling you, you could have.
Well, Lincoln Center has a little ring to it, and I love
Yes.
jazz. I think jazz is such an important art form, and we have to support the jazzers. It's really tough out there for the musicians. I have a jazz club here in Los Angeles called Vibrato, and there's so many young musicians that are absolutely fantastic, and you never hear of them.
I know.
because it's hard to get through the maze. There's so many, records or whatever, zeros and ones coming out every day. It's just hard to get through the maze because radio isn't what it used to be.
When you think about your era in the 60s, and I've gotten to talk with some of the folks at Motown, which was a thrill. And the thing about radio, it wasn't as homogenized. You would get the Beatles, you got Motown, you got a Herb Alpert track. As a matter of fact, Whipped Cream, because I did a little homework. I love this. Whipped Cream, number one for 8 weeks in 1965. You outsold the Beatles and the Stones with that album. And yet the first track, Taste of Honey, which was reinvented sort of by the Beatles, on their early days. And I started thinking about, because I'm a Beatle geek. I mean, that was my, oh, that was like the primer to the world. The Beatles took me everywhere. I found jazz, I found progressive rock, I found music, I found show tunes, I found everything through. They were my music teachers. But in looking at what you've done, when I think Michelle, all my loving, Taste of Honey, with a little help from my friends, oh blah di oh blah da, and I love her. And with your wife, with Lanny Hall, with Brazil 66, Fool on the Hill is one of the greatest tracks I ever heard. What were the Beatles to Herb Alpert back in the 60s?
Oh, well, everyone, I get asked the question, is there anything you would do differently? And the one thing I would have done differently in 1962, when the Lonely Bull happened and A&M was formed, there was a chance to sign the Beatles for
Really?
distribution in the NIS. And yes, I would have done that. I would have signed them, but who knew? The music they put out in 62 was completely different from when they got really in the heart of what they were just really so um they had such a wide span of musicality, and George Martin seemed to know how to corral all that and put it in its proper place. They were fantastic. I love them to this day.
I've always said, and Stevie Van Zandt is my partner in crime, if you will. Aiden and Betty, we do live Beatles shows together and things like that. And as Stevie always pointed out, they were the first group that evolved, that started here and then quickly just kept jumping to go from She Loves You, yeah, 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 to Turn
Yeah.
Off Your Mind, Relax and Float Downstream, This Is Not Dying in 2 years. Imagine a boy band now touring for 2 years and going, that's it, we're done touring. We want to write something deeper and more meaningful. The managers
Yeah.
would have a heart attack and drop dead. You stay in your lane, you do your thing. And the coolest music that we had in all these bands that you signed was they didn't just stay in one place. They evolved. They searched for other things to do.
Oh yeah. And when you give a great artist a chance to stretch out, that's when it happens. And when we heard Cat Stevens for the first time, I couldn't believe this guy. He just Cat and a guitar knocked you completely out because his authentic way of playing and singing and the songs he wrote and the uniqueness in the rhythms that he chose. He was just special. And like Jerry and I always wanted to, you know, like I said before, we weren't looking for the beat of the week. We wanted these people that had something uniquely special to say in their own way. And when I found the Carpenters, it's not the music that I normally gravitate towards, but when I heard her sing
Yep.
and Richard, knowing that Richard was a fabulous piano player and an arranger, the two of them together, it was magic. But they need the song. It's all about the songs. It's the melodies. The melodies reign king. It's like Quincy once said. He said you could take the two greatest singers in the world and give them a bad song, and it's going nowhere.
It's he's absolutely right. I mean, what a genius. And I mean, his passing was sad, but what a legacy that he left to the world. Will like you guys are the gods that created all this. When I think about all the songs again, melody, and from Tijuana Taxi to Spanish Flea to The Lonely Bull. And it's interesting how McCartney and Lennon, all the books that have written about how they're done, I've learned more about them from other musicians and things about the songwriting and the inspirations. Do me a favor, share this story. I read a story about The Lonely Bull and about how a trip to Mexico to a bullfight inspired you and created the song for you?
Well, there was many bullfights to Tijuana in the spring for about 3 years. I would do that, and there was this brass band in the stands that played fanfares. They didn't. There wasn't mariachi music. I never listened to mariachi music, but this this group of people, they were just doing ba da ba ba da ba da da ba da ba, and then the bull would rush out, but then they do another fanfare, another variation on that one, and then all sorts of things. It was something that just touched me, and I tried to get the feeling of that afternoon in a song. And a friend of mine that I was now and then playing casual dates with him, he was a piano player at Salt Lake. He had a song that he played for me. It didn't sound anything like The Lonely Bull. He had it like a music box. It was very uh, kind of a dainty little song, but I loved the melody. So I took that melody, I changed a little bit of the structure in the bridge, didn't take credit for that, didn't want to. It was his song. But that was the catalyst. I didn't realize it was going to take me to faraway places. But when it was in the top 10, and I got a letter from a lady in Germany, and she said, "Dear Mr. Alpert, thank you for sending me on this vicarious trip to Tijuana." And I chuckled when I read it, and I thought, well, that's interesting. That various vicarious trip. She got the picture. And I
Yeah.
said, that's the type of music I want to make. I want to make music that takes you someplace, that gives you a feeling of, and it's personal. Whatever might take one person to a faraway land might take another person next door. It doesn't really matter. It's just that it's something that touches. Music is all. I look at my. I'm almost 90 now. In I think all the arts, music, sculpting, painting, acting, poetry. It's all about a feeling. It's not about how articulate you are or how the technique that can razzle dazzle you. It's about the feeling. And I know there are a lot of artists out there that try to impress you with their abilities.
Yes.
And I'll tell you a little story. I was dear friends with Jerry Mulligan,
Hmm.
great
Great saxophone player.
baritone sax player, and he was when Bill Clinton was inaugurated for president. He got 10 sax players to at the party he was throwing. I'm not sure what the party was, but 10 sax players, and Jerry was one of the sax players. So I spoke to Jerry about 3 days after he did this at the White House. And I said, "Did you have a good time?" He says, "Yeah, man, these young musicians, they can play high and low and fast. They know all the changes and all the modes and all the chords to play." He says, "The only thing they don't know how to do is leave the bone alone." And I understood exactly what he was saying. They try to get their whole story in one chorus, and he's looking for something that develops a storyline, something that just develops as a jazz improvisation.
It's the thing I love most about Miles Davis. Think if you put a stopwatch on how often he doesn't play in a song, if you saw the spaces that he leaves, that leaves you, the listener, to complete it. It's a converse. He's not yelling at me. It's a conversation with music that we have. You do that all the time. The greats do it. You can go on a trip. It's one of my favorite. Like I said, the world open to jazz and classical, starting from the Beatles and the progressive rock. But I love Aaron Copland, and he was once asked after Billy the Kid came out. They said, "When were you out west? When have you spent time, in Wyoming? Where did you go?" And he said, "I've never been west of New Jersey." They said,
Yeah,
"What
I
do you
remember
mean?"
that.
He said, "No, as a kid, I read the cowboy books and watched cowboy westerns." So, "Well, don't you want to go?" And he said, "No, it would ruin it for me because in my mind, the West,
Yeah,
the rodeo, the thing that I have in my head could never
right.
live up. The reality could never be what it is. So I write from my imagination as a kid's imagination. Why are we still listening to it in 2024? Because it was created from a personal from here."
Oh yeah, and the beauty of it is, there are only 12 notes, period, no more. in the Western, lexicon. It's 12 notes. I mean, Mozart had those notes. Thelonious Monk had those same notes. Beethoven had those same notes. Uh, Otis Redding had those same, you know what I mean? It's just amazing what can be done with 12 notes if you relax and invent.
Okay, okay, so it's an unanswerable question, but you're Herb Alpert, so I'm going to ask it anyway, and nobody's ever answered it for me. Just like you said, 12 notes. Da, 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 da. Or the Beatles, da, 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 dum, just a simple riff from George, or da, 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 da. Is there a magic to it? Can it be taught, or you're born with the ability to hear that, or you're not?
I don't think there's anybody that can say those are beautiful notes. That's a beautiful melody. It's going to be a hit. At A&M, artists, producers would come in wanting us to distribute their record because there were a lot of producers in the 60s that just they operated out of the trunks of their car, you know. So this guy comes in with a song, and I would take the time to listen to all these songs that would come in, and I heard this thing, and man, I was thinking, I hate this thing. And I was thinking to myself, it's too long, it's out of tune. I heard there was a better record of it years back, and I passed on it, and I passed on Louie Louie, you know. And that song, is still somewhat popular, but I still don't like the song. I was just using my gut feelings on everything I did at A&M and still do. That's how I operate.
Everything was wrong about that song. Mark Lindsay from Paul Revere and the Raiders, they're in the North, I think it was Oregon, was it? He said that was the big party song. We were all playing that song. We knew it. And we went in and cut it, and it sounded terrific when it was locked in. And then we heard the Kingsman and said he had just gotten the lead singer, just got braces on his teeth. And those
Yeah.
days, one microphone. And the engineer went, it's a brand new Neumann mic. You're not spitting on my mic, and put it up 5 feet in the air. So, well, how am I going to?
Oh,
He goes, yell. So he wound up just yelling over the one take, Louie, Louie, oh, baby. And you couldn't understand what he said. And people thought there was a dirty word in it. Hit forever. Everything's
yeah.
wrong. And that made it the hit.
Yeah.
I love that stuff.
Well, that's the way it goes. You just never know.
Herb
I
Alpert is
I
coming.
learned a
By the way,
lot.
I just want to hit it again. Concert celebration, March 31st, Jazz at Lincoln Center's Rose Theater on your birthday. But you've added a second show because that's sold out, right?
It's sold out. I mean, it sold out rather quickly, and in 2 weeks, it sold out actually. And that caught me off guard. I mean, I was happy and excited about doing this tour, but gee, I had no idea that so many people did want to hear that Tijuana brass sound, and I'm going to give it to them. It's going to be beautiful.
The funniest thing in reading about you, and as a kid, there's the albums, Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass. I didn't know, none of us really knew at the time that there was this group of musicians called the Wrecking Crew in Los Angeles, and that they were pretty much every band we heard on every record. And I read that so they did, Hal Blaine and Carol Kay and Tommy Tedesco, all these great musicians, Glenn Campbell, and that then you had to go find a band to tour after the fact.
But yeah, that's true. Yeah, we did. And then the first time I got a band together, we were playing with Dave Brubeck. Dave
Wow.
Brubeck, he opened the show for Dave Brubeck at the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium. And I remember Paul Desmond was standing in the wings and leaning against the wall as I came by. He says, he was kind of scratching his head and he said, I don't know what I heard, but I think I like it.
That's as good a compliment as you'll ever get, right? I mean,
I know. Oh, he was magic. Yeah, and on that same tour I saw him, they were playing a song, and all of a sudden he started squeaking a bit on the sax, which he rarely does. So he just casually stopped, took the reed out of his horn, and looked on the floor. He had a bunch of reeds there, and he kept putting it another while the song was still going on, man. It was like a 45-second lull. And he finally got his reed back on and started playing the horn, and like nothing had happened. It was so casual.
I mean, live performance is different for so many people. There are artists I know who are terrified about performing live, and others who say, we finished an album, we did it, but we don't know what we have until we play it for an audience. The album, and I mean, even McCartney said, until it's out there and people hear it, I still don't believe it until the audience tells me they like it or they don't like it.
Oh, yeah, that's absolutely what happened to the Tijuana Brass when I finally got the group together. It was after I recorded the Whipped Cream and Other Delights album. We were playing up in Seattle, Washington, and every time I played Taste of Honey, there was a tremendous reaction from it. I mean, sometimes I'd play it twice in a row, and my partner Jerry was pushing the other side. It was third man theme was the A side. Taste of Honey was on the B side. So I called Jerry. I said, Jerry, look at man, you're on the wrong side. It's Taste of Honey. He says, man, you can't dance to that thing. It stops and starts in the middle. I don't think radio's going to like it. I said, I don't know if they're going to like it or not, but I'm just telling you, there's a focus group up here that tells me Taste of Honey is the good one. So he finally turned it over, and that was the door one that opened the door for me completely. That's when we got, the Ed Sullivan Show and all the Danny Kaye and Andy Williams and all the great shows wanted us. So we had that tremendous chance off of one record.
I mean, and then to come back again later on, encore with Rise, which is absolutely tremendous. I mean, it's as if it was part of the same seamless piece of work. How did that come in your world? How did that become, you know what, I want to create this?
Yeah, Rise was kind of an accident because my nephew, Randy Badass Alpert, he wrote that song Rise with a friend, Andy Armour. Randy said, man, Uncle, why don't you take the Tijuana Brass songs and it was the disc during the disco period. He says, make a disco record of some of these songs. I said, man, I don't want to do that. Let them die in peace. Said, no, no, do it. He says, if you don't do it, somebody's going to do it. So at that time, the 3M company loaned A&M Recording Studios a 3M 32-track digital machine. And I wanted to try out the machine for our company just to see, I didn't know anything about that technology. And so I said, okay, let's get a couple of those songs together and I'll try it. So we got some great musicians and started playing Taste of Honey or one of those songs with the disco boom, boom, boom beat. And I said, Randy, I can't do that. It's just let them die in peace, please. I mean, I'm not desperate to get a hit record here. And they had this song that he had written with his partner. He wanted to do that at 120 beats per minute. I said, no, I love this melody, man. Let's slow it down. Let's slow it down and people can dance, cheek to cheek or whatever. So we did. We slowed it down to 100 beats per minute. And it was recorded live in the studio. And Abraham Laboriel played this fantastic bass line that just looped and went on together forever. And he was dancing around the studio as he was playing this thing, as far as his chord would allow. And I heard the playback of it was like, I think it was the third take, and I got goosebumps. I was in the control room thinking like, whoa, man, this is good. And I leaned over to Julius Wechter, who played the marimbas on Rise. I said, he was a dear friend of mine. I said, man, what do you think of this thing? And he turned around and says, I hate it. I said, what do you mean I hate it? He says, I don't like that four to the floor, boom, boom. He was a jazz musician.
Right.
And the four to the floor was really bothering him. So anyways, I didn't think anything about his comment other than an honest comment. I can always handle honesty. So
Yeah.
we put it out. It took a little bit of time, but then when it hit, man, it hit hard. And it's
Because
still going.
again, it's a conversation between the musicians. When it's live, like you said, somebody's dancing. Maybe it speeds up a little bit. Maybe it doesn't. You hear mistakes that are made with the Beatles and the Stones, especially in the early days. Things were rough. It's alive. It's a living, breathing thing. And look, I'm not one to ever put down anyone else's music ever, but what I hear in pop songs today, everything is perfectly quantized, everything is absolutely perfect, and it takes the soul out of it for me. Somebody wins a Grammy, Herb, and 35 people get up from the theater and walk up on the stage. That's not a song, that's a business to me.
Hey man, this is good. Did you play an instrument?
Yeah, I played a little piano as a kid. I play drums now, and watching the greats, not just how fast you can do it, but the Stuart Copeland and what Ringo does, the fills, as we talk about the
Yeah.
Beatles. He's not as fast as anyone, but he swung a lot of those beats to put in like a mambo beat on a rock song back in 64, 65. The night before, ding, ching, I'm like, that's so
Yeah.
hip, even if you don't realize he's doing it. It changes the whole feeling.
Man, you got your finger on it. You're right. I totally agree with you. 100%. It's all about a feel. And
Yeah.
that's what people listen to. They don't listen to the obvious things that if you're way up in your head, you're going to think about improving this and the intonation, put it on the system that can correct the intonation. And yeah, you take the heart out of it. I remember doing I had the whole idea for that arrangement, called these musicians in. We had a 3-hour session. I wanted to really capture this one. I captured it in 20 minutes and I let everyone go. It was the feeling that all of a sudden happened on that first take. And I told a couple of the guys, can I improve on my sound? You don't have to improve on anything, man. It's right there. It feels good. What more do you need?
Yeah, I mean, that's the magic of it. I mean, sometimes it is one take, or you've recorded 35 and you're still going back to the first take and you realize that was the one that was most honest. Like I said, learning about musicians from other musicians, the Beatles, who were everything. Jack Douglas, I recently talked with, who's become a friend, who, started with, he was the engineer on Imagine and produced Double Fantasy. I said, who is the easiest person you ever worked with in the studio? He said, oh, it's easy, John Lennon. I said, really? He said, yeah. He'd do a few takes of the vocals. And I say, I'm going to start putting in together some rough takes. He said, and he just said to him, Jack, just use the one that you feel has the most me in it. He said, if I made a mistake, leave it.
Yeah.
Make it louder. I don't, just he
Yeah.
said, and I realized I'm editing and mixing like for emotion, not for he was a little flat here or let's pitch this or that he was a little late on that intro. And he said, I realized that's real magic.
Yeah. And that's sometimes hard to see, hard to hear. You got to be in a relaxed place to be able to accept that type of information.
Yeah. And I guess confidence as well. I'm talking
Well,
with
and the zeros and ones have ruined everyone because you get so many options. We A&M Studios, we were a custom studio, so we had other artists. There was a rock band, 4 people in our studio for 3 months recording their album. It came time to mix it. I happened to be walking in the near the lounge and talking to the producer. I said, man, now it's time to do it, man. You can mix this whole thing up. He says, no, it's a little bit of a problem. I said, why? He says, I have the drums on 35 tracks. You know what I mean? they they caused the whole problem for themselves.
I mean, again, like Ringo, Mike here, Mike up there, Mike on the snare, Mike on the, we're done. Could they sound any better? No. I mean, it just, because it's the emotion of the piece, and that's what did it. Herb Alpert, what a legend. I could do this with you. This is such a joy talking music with you and learning. As I said, you covered a lot of Beatles songs with Tijuana Brass. What was the vibe? Was there like jealousy for their hits? Because everybody said it was a fight for chart position. Who is it? It was Eddie and Brian Holland had come up, and he said, what we realized in Detroit is if you had a good song, that wasn't going to make it because the quality of what everybody was doing from Liverpool to LA to New York to Atlanta to Detroit, everybody had such great songs. You had to have a great song to break into the top 10. I said, so was there jealousy? Was there respect? What was the vibe of you guys of I mean, maybe like the LA people or Herb Alpert to the Beatles, like owning the charts.
Yeah, well, first off, when I got the group together and we flew to the UK, Brian Epstein was our the bookers, and so he organized a party at his place, and I met the guys, and they were like, I don't know if humble's the right word, but they were just regular people. They were not special. I mean, they didn't have like a aren't they wonderful type of feeling. It was just a wonderful group of guys. And then, when the Beatles broke up, George Harrison had a label called Dark Horse, and it was distributed by A&M. And he was on our lot a lot, and he married one of our secretaries, Olivia.
Oh my
But
God,
he was,
that's right. I forgot that connection. Yes.
yeah, and he was a lovely guy, man. He was authentic. He was real, uh, and I think he wrote one of the most beautiful songs the Beatles recorded. And he was in the minority when it came to the songs that were chosen. But there's something in the way she moves. Wow, what a great idea.
I mean, if Sinatra says it's the greatest love song ever written, but I've always said that George Harrison was the greatest songwriter in any band in that era that didn't have Lennon and McCartney. He just happened to be the third guy with these two giants, and good for George Martin to sort of push and give him a little bit of room. And on that last album, those two songs, Something and Here Comes the Sun, he gets the two starring songs on that album.
Yeah, well, George had the feel though, and he was really a lovely human being, man. He did so many nice things for other people and raised a lot of money for some great causes. He was special.
Oh, Herb, this is great. I can't wait to see you at Jazz at Lincoln Center. Once again, he is coming. Let me get the date.
March
What's
31st,
Thursday? And April
my
1st is
birthday.
happy almost birthday. Almost
Yeah,
there.
man. I'm looking forward to it, but man, my birthdays are coming every 3 months now, so yeah, I can wait. But
Like I said, ain't nobody's stopping me. Do it. It was was talking interviewing Keith Richards, and I said, the standard question, you don't need the money. Why keep touring? And as he hit the cigarette, he said, because no one applauds when you take the garbage out at home, baby. That was got it.
that's
Got it.
good.
Everybody like McCartney, why? Of course he doesn't need the money. You don't need the money. I mean, it's the joy of sharing. To me, it's a conversation between you and the audience. It's a loop of the joy that the audience has of you. Why, when thousands of people want to see you perform and feel your music, and you can do it, and you're proud of the level you can do it at, why the hell stop? Like, it's like it's just a joyous thing. But here's the hardest question. I'll leave it with this. And I did a talk with Clive Davis about this, and he stopped and said, no one's ever asked me that question. So it's a tough one. Here we are in 2024. You haven't entered the music business. You've run the music business. You've created such great art. Somebody now trying to break through. What do you tell them? How do you tell them? There used to be a way you had a manager, you played clubs, somebody came to see you, they saw the fire. Now everything is YouTube and influencers and how many followers you have. What do you say to a young person trying to break through today?
Well, you have to find your own voice for one. You have to be authentic. And I had a problem playing the horn in 1970, 1971. I was going through a divorce and I started stuttering through the instrument and I couldn't get the first note out right. So I met this teacher in New York. His name was Carmine Caruso. He was called the troubleshooter. And he was teaching students from all over the globe who had problems playing their instrument. And when I met him, I said, Carmine, what am I doing wrong? Should I change my mouthpiece or the trumpet itself? He said, let me tell you something, kid. He said, that trumpet of yours is just a piece of plumbing. That's all it is. It's just a series of pipes. You're the instrument. That instrument,
How?
that trumpet is just a megaphone. It's just an amplifier of your sound. That sound comes from deep within you. And I try to, pass that on to students and musicians. And I think that's the whole key. Find your own voice. I tried sounding like, Miles and Harry James and Louis Armstrong and all. I came to the realization, who wants to hear that? They've already done it. So I was looking for my own voice, but when he said that, it was like, oh, yeah. It's not about technique. It's not about anything else, but finding out that thing that you do naturally.
And that's what allowed you to play again because now you were free.
Oh yeah, I was totally free, and I'm playing better now at 89 than I was playing 40 years ago.
I can't wait to hear you play live. Herb Alpert, thank you so much for the time. This was joyous for me. I hope it wasn't too painful.
I had a really good time, Ken. Yeah, I
Excellent.
appreciate all the things that we talked about. Thank you
Same
so
here.
much.
It really does
Yeah.
matter. Thanks for all the music throughout the years. And I will see you I'll see you in the spring. I'll bring some birthday cake.
Okay, thank you.
New York's classic rock, Q1043.